What if I told you that some of the most famous history lessons you learned in school are actually totally wrong? Imagine being told that people once thought the Earth was flat, or that Napoleon was tiny, and that the Great Wall of China can be seen from space. Sounds familiar, right? Well, it turns out these well-known facts are actually myths. Today, we're going to uncover 5 famous history lies you've probably been taught, and I guarantee, by the end of this video, you'll see history in a whole new light. 1. The Earth was flat. Let's kick things off with a big one. The Earth was flat. If you're like most people, you've heard this one your whole life. It's a classic, right? The idea that ancient civilizations thought the Earth was flat? Well, it's not true. Ancient Greeks, like Pythagoras and Aristotle, already knew the Earth was round. They figured it out by watching the stars, the shadows of the Earth during lunar eclipses, and even by the way ships disappear over the horizon. So, where did this myth come from? It's actually a misunderstanding that developed over time, mainly during the Renaissance period when people started to simplify ancient history. The truth is, by the time Columbus set sail in 1492, the roundness of the Earth was already well established. In fact, it wasn't until much later, during the 19th century, that the myth of the flat Earth really took hold due to misunderstandings about medieval thought. Ancient sailors and explorers had a pretty solid understanding of the Earth's shape. Proof is in their navigation skills and global exploration efforts. You might also be surprised to learn that even ancient Egyptians used the stars and geometry to calculate the Earth's curvature. So, while the myth may seem like common knowledge, it's far from the truth. This misconception largely stems from how historical periods were viewed through the lens of later generations, which simplified things based on their own understanding. 2. Napoleon was very short. Next up, we're talking about Napoleon Bonaparte. You've probably heard that Napoleon was incredibly short, right? That is the reason why we use the term Napoleon complex for someone who's short and aggressive. But here's the truth. Napoleon wasn't short at all. In fact, he was about 5'7" inch, which was average height for a man in his time. So why is he always portrayed as tiny? Well, it all goes back to confusion between French and British measurements. The records show Napoleon was 5 feet 2 inches in French feet, but British feet were a little longer. So when his height was translated, it made him appear shorter than he really was. Plus, British cartoons and propaganda during his reign helped create the image of him being short to make him seem less threatening. It was a clever tactic to undermine his authority and power, especially since he was such a formidable leader. In reality, Napoleon's height was just one of many aspects of his image that was distorted for political gain. It's also interesting to note that Napoleon's height was actually quite consistent with that of other historical leaders at the time. But over time, the myth of his short stature grew due to these misconceptions. His stature became a symbol of the larger-than-life persona that was built up around him, and his enemies took advantage of that myth to try and discredit him. 3. The Great Wall of China can be seen from space. Now, let's talk about the Great Wall of China. We've all heard that it's the only man-made object visible from space, right? But guess what? That's actually a myth. The Great Wall is huge, over 13,000 miles long, but it's not visible to the naked eye from space. Astronauts have confirmed that, unless you're using special equipment like a telescope, the wall blends in with its surroundings and is hard to spot from space. How did this myth get started? It goes back to a book published in 1938 that popularized the idea. Once it was out there, it stuck. But the reality is, while the Great Wall is an amazing feat of engineering, it's not visible from orbit. In fact, many other human-made structures are just as or more visible from space, like the pyramids in Egypt and the sprawling cities across the globe. The myth persisted because of its visual appeal. It's easy to imagine the wall as a giant ribbon visible from space, but that's not the case in reality. The wall itself is a stunning landmark when viewed from the ground, but when you're thousands of miles above, it's actually quite difficult to distinguish from the surrounding terrain. This misconception also highlights how myths can often spread because of the sheer scale and grandeur of an object. It's also important to recognize that the myth is more of a modern-day interpretation rather than a traditional belief. 4. Marie Antoinette said, "Let them eat cake." Let's move on to Marie Antoinette, the French queen who supposedly said, "Let them eat cake," when told that the French people were starving. This quote has been used to portray her as a symbol of royal ignorance and indifference. But here's the truth. She never said it. The phrase was actually first attributed to her by revolutionaries to turn the public against her. The quote was likely invented as part of a propaganda effort to make the monarchy look even more out of touch with the suffering of the people. Marie Antoinette was actually very involved in charity work, but the revolutionary leaders used this line to frame her as a villain. So, let them eat cake. Not her words, but definitely a lie that stuck. This myth is deeply tied to the negative public image that Marie Antoinette had towards the end of her reign, where her lavish lifestyle became a symbol of everything that was wrong with the French monarchy. In truth, she was more concerned with the country's issues than history often gives her credit for. Her infamous image was largely shaped by the turmoil surrounding the French Revolution and the efforts of revolutionaries to gain public support. The Queen's real actions were often overshadowed by the aggressive narrative pushed by her political enemies. 5. Witches were burned in Salem. And finally, the infamous Salem witch trials. You've probably heard the story about women being burned at the stake during the trials, right? While this is a well-known image, it's also completely false. The truth is, the accused witches in Salem were mostly hanged, not burned. A few were pressed to death with heavy stones, but burning was not part of the executions. This myth probably came about because of how witch hunts were portrayed in other parts of Europe, where burning was more common. In Salem, the trials were fueled by mass hysteria, fear, and superstition, but the executions were mostly by hanging. So, while the trials were horrific, the burning part, just another myth. The Salem witch trials were a dark chapter in history, and it's important we get the facts straight. Over 200 people were accused, and the panic spread across the community, with the belief that witches were causing all sorts of harm. But in reality, the burning part was never a part of the Salem trials. The trials themselves were tragic, with the entire town gripped by paranoia. And while the hysteria led to multiple deaths, it was the hanging that became the infamous method of execution. This myth about burning witches became popular largely due to media portrayals and the widespread misrepresentation of other European witch hunts. So, there you have it, 5 famous history myths that you probably learned in school. It's wild, right? History is full of surprises, and these myths only show how easily the truth can get twisted over time. We've debunked some of the most famous lies, but there's still so much more to discover. Who knows what other myths you've been taught? If you enjoyed busting these history myths, hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe for more amazing historical facts. Let's keep uncovering the truth together. Until next time, keep questioning what you know.